I'm Scott Peterson, and today I'm the face of America. My first job out of college was in the capital of New York State in Albany. I helped open a homeless youth shelter. There were 5 of us, and we opened a homeless youth shelter called the Louis A. Swire Shelter. He was a well-known philanthropist in New York, construction company, and he funded a lot of different youth programs. And my first job after the homeless shelter was to start up a diversion program called Youth Court, where young people serve as judge and prosecutor and jury for their peers who've been arrested. So it really diverts them from the system. And that was in 1993. It was called Youth Courts of the Capital District. And it was one of the first programs in the country that Youth Court was. Now there's over almost 2,000 of them. That first program became a state model in New York State, and we replicated it in 50 communities throughout New York. And then one day we got a phone call from the United States Department of Justice. Our first female Attorney General for the United States was Janet Reno, and she visited the program that I had started, the diversion program. And about 2 months later, I got a phone call asking if I'd come work in the executive branch of the U.S. Department of Justice in the Juvenile Justice Office and replicate these programs around the country. And so I watched it grow from about 78 programs in 1994. And by the time I left the Justice Department in 2008, there were about 1,400 of them. And so that was kind of an exciting job. I got to do a lot of interesting things living in the nation's capital. But I got to work with a lot of different national organizations and people really striving to reduce juvenile justice, which eventually reduces criminal justice rates. My name is Scott Peterson, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Global Youth Justice, which champions 1,800 youth and teen court diversion programs around the globe on 5 continents. And we are mobilizing volunteers, youth and adults around the country and the world to reduce juvenile justice and criminal justice rates. We grew up in a good family. Our parents, holidays, we would go down to the homeless shelter, the senior center, and cook Thanksgiving dinner. They taught us to, I guess, look at people for who they are and what they are, and not so much what they have. And I guess it was a daily thing your parents instill in you. They were good people. Both were hardworking. So my dad especially I was close with. He was a good man. He was a chef, and he only got to 3rd grade, but he taught himself. He had a lot of horse sense, as you would say, and he just was a good dad. If you go back to the first juvenile court in the country, it was 1899 in Chicago, and not since that time period, 1899, has there been something that has replicated this much. And it's very much local grassroots. It's really a textbook example. And what happens, it spreads from one community to the next community to the next community. And so Global Youth Justice is a nonprofit, but it's different. It's kind of like a quasi public nonprofit, because juvenile justice is an essential public service. So what we are doing is we're really creating a local movement and sometimes those words can be used pretty easily. People can use grassroots or a movement, but this really has been local communities. And I think one of the rare things that we see with Global Youth Justice is these youth and teen court programs. No one owns them. So whether you want to call it a peer jury, teen court, student court, youth court, no one owns that, and all of the things on our Global Youth Justice website are public domain. So therefore, anybody can pick this program up locally and replicate it. And the good thing, it's not just a police program, but police departments run them, but courts run them, probation departments run them, nonprofits, schools. So it's not any one entity kind of like Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America. That's more prevention. But there's no entity that really owns this, so anybody can pick it up, which is why we've seen it expand to the Netherlands, Germany, England, South Korea. So we're excited. We have almost 1,800 now, and we have a goal to get to 5,000 youth courts with the United Nations global goals by 2030. Funding has been cut, whether it's been through the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration. So there's really been a reduction in federal funding in this country for juvenile justice. The past 10, 15 years, I think the high point for juvenile justice funding was 1997 to about 2000. And what we've seen the last almost 20 years is the federal funding be reduced. And there's been very little people standing up for it. Most people are just, they worry about not speaking up because they're not going to get a grant from the federal government. So we're just going full steam ahead trying to divert these kids. That's our main thing, is to stop arresting all these children and youth, because then they just end up in the criminal justice system. And we're able to do this without the federal government intervening. So that's one of the unique parts too. Most of these other big groups, a lot of these places are reliant on federal funding. And we're relying on adult volunteers pushing this global youth justice movement. So they can't be stopped. We're just going to keep pushing ahead with it. And record numbers of youth are volunteering. George Washington University reported over 120,000 youth are volunteering each year to divert their peers. And a lot of the youth volunteers are former offenders. One of the things we kind of like to say, it's not you we don't like, it's your behavior. Accept responsibility for what you did and move on. Don't take the stigma with you. But what we're thinking is we can replicate this to the adult criminal justice system. If youth are volunteering in these huge numbers, we've got about 250,000 involved now around the world. Why can't we do that for adults age 18 all the way up through death? And so Judge Burnett, Jonathan House-Dutch, our board chairperson, and I, we're developing an adult version to be called the Community Acceptance Program, CAP. And it would be from people 18 years old all the way up through death. So the adults watching, you might go to your local courtroom, because we're using courtrooms around the country. We're paying for them as taxpayer dollars, so why do they need to sit there dark at nighttime 4 or 5 nights? So adults are using the real courtrooms. But we're going to use this to transfer it soon to the adult criminal justice system. And we're not going to check with the government. We're just going to send out an announcement, and we're going to say we're going to pick 25 communities to be demonstration sites. We all got issues. Some of us just have more than others. And what we're seeing now, especially with, some of the, as the population's getting older, and we're not really sure why, but a lot of people, having memory problems and emotional issues. So a lot of people, if you're 75 years old and stealing hamburger meat, you don't need to be locked up and charged. And if you don't have money, of course, we know poor people go more into the system.